What happens when a veteran cop with a history of bias unknowingly pulls over the state's most powerful man? This encounter is about to change everything, for him, for the community, and for the future of justice. It was a quiet afternoon on Route 29, just outside Charlottesville, Virginia. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden hues over the asphalt. Officer Ted Marshall, a 20-year veteran of the force, sat in his patrol car on the shoulder, scanning the road for anything that caught his eye. Marshall had a reputation, a no-nonsense cop with a history of disproportionately pulling over black drivers, though no one had ever formally called him out on it. A sleek black SUV approached, moving slightly over the speed limit. Marshall's lips curled into a smirk as he reached for the siren. "Gotcha," he muttered. The SUV obediently slowed and pulled over. As Marshall approached, the driver rolled down the window, a young black man in a tailored suit, exuding confidence. He was calm, composed, and completely unfazed by the officer towering over him. "License and registration," Marshall barked. The man handed over his documents without hesitation, offering a polite nod. Marshall scrutinized them, searching for anything, that would justify this stop. Everything was in order. Still, he pressed on. "You know why I pulled you over?" His voice held an edge of condescension. "I assume you'll tell me," the man replied evenly. Marshall frowned. There was no nervousness, no scrambling to explain, just a steady, unshaken presence. "You were speeding," he declared, though even he knew it was a flimsy excuse. "Step out of the vehicle." The man hesitated, just for a second, then gracefully stepped out, standing tall and meeting Marshall's gaze without fear. "What brings you to this area?" Marshall pressed, circling the vehicle as if looking for a reason to escalate. "Work." The man clasped his hands in front of him, unwavering. Marshall's suspicion deepened, not because of anything real, but because of his own ingrained biases. "You seem awfully calm for someone who just got pulled over. Got something to hide?" The man smiled faintly. "No, officer." "Do you?" Marshall's face hardened. The word struck a nerve. He straightened, looming over the man, trying to assert control. But for the first time in a long time, a flicker of unease crept in, not because of what the man had done, but because of how unshakable he seemed. "Open the trunk," Marshall ordered. The man sighed but complied, pressing a button to pop it open. Inside, a neatly packed leather briefcase and a small duffel bag sat undisturbed. Marshall rifled through them carelessly, unfolding pressed shirts and inspecting personal items as if they were contraband. "What kind of work needs a wardrobe like this?" Marshall sneered. "The kind where appearances matter," the man replied. "Should I be concerned about how you're handling my things?" Marshall clenched his jaw. "You're awfully bold for someone pulled over on my highway." The man tilted his head, the barest hint of amusement in his tone. "Your highway? I didn't realize Route 29 was privately owned." Marshall stepped closer, toe-to-toe, pushing for intimidation. "You've got a smart mouth. That might not work out so well for you." The man's expression didn't change. Instead, his voice dropped slightly. "Officer, are you sure you want to keep going down this path?" Marshall scoffed. "Is that a threat?" "No," the man replied smoothly. "It's a question." Before Marshall could respond, he caught sight of a passing car slowing down. A pair of children in the back seat pressed their faces against the window, watching. For the first time, Marshall felt the weight of perception, the optics of this moment. The man exhaled, his patience wearing thin. "I'm not who you think I am, officer. And you're about to find that out." Marshall returned to his patrol car and typed the man's information into the system. The results popped up instantly, and his stomach dropped. Elijah Porter. Newly elected governor of Virginia. Marshall stared at the screen, then at the man, at Elijah. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. He had just humiliated himself in front of the most powerful man in the state. Elijah leaned against his car, watching him. "I take it you figured it out." Marshall climbed out, his confidence evaporated. "Governor Porter," he stammered, his tone shifting to something resembling respect. Elijah studied him, unreadable. "What now, Officer Marshall?" The balance of power had shifted. And for the first time, Marshall had to ask himself, what would he do with this moment? Because Elijah Porter had every right to humiliate him, to punish him. But he wasn't angry. He was something else, something Marshall couldn't quite place. "Let's talk about what just happened," Elijah said. "I complied with every request. My documents are in order. I broke no laws. And yet, here we are. Tell me why." Marshall had no answer. "I didn't know who you were," he admitted quietly. "Exactly," Elijah said, his voice firm. "You didn't know who I was, but you assumed I was someone you could treat like this. And why? Because of how I look. The car I drive? What was it, officer?" Marshall's hands clenched, not in anger, but in shame. Elijah exhaled. "I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm here to teach you something. Whether you learn it or not is up to you." Marshall looked up, confused. "Teach me?" "You're coming with me," Elijah said. "There's a community forum tonight. You're going to sit and listen to the stories of the people you claim to serve. Maybe then you'll understand the impact of what just happened." Marshall hesitated, his pride warring with reality. But deep down, he knew he had no choice. "Fine," he said gruffly. Elijah nodded. "Good." That night, as Marshall sat in a packed community center, listening to people share stories of fear, distrust, and pain, his own actions reflected back at him in their words, he realized something. For years, he had thought he was enforcing the law. But in reality, he had been enforcing his own biases. And for the first time, he wanted to change. The next morning, Marshall returned to work. He carried a notebook, started asking different questions, and attended forums he once ignored. Months later, Elijah received a letter, a handwritten note from Marshall with a photo of a new community police relations board. "I still have a lot to learn," the note read. "But I'm learning. Thank you for giving me the chance to see things differently." Elijah smiled. Change was slow. But in that moment, he felt a spark of hope. And sometimes, that's all it takes to start something bigger.